Scene 1. Hook. The Airbus A321 floated peacefully above a sea of white clouds at 37,000 feet. From the cabin, it looked like another routine flight. Passengers watched movies. Children slept against their parents. Flight attendants served coffee with practiced smiles. Inside the cockpit, Captain Michael Dawson glanced at the weather radar. Nothing unusual. First Officer Daniel Kim reviewed the arrival checklist. Everything was perfectly normal. Then, a warning chime shattered the silence. Beep, beep, beep. A bright amber message flashed across the ECAM display. Seconds later, another warning appeared. Then another. The aircraft suddenly lurched to the left. Autopilot disconnected. A loud electronic voice echoed through the cockpit. Autopilot off. Captain Dawson grabbed the side stick. What just happened? Before either pilot could answer, the captain stopped speaking. His breathing became shallow. His hand slipped from the controls. The first officer turned. Captain. No response. Then, the first officer reached for the radio. But before he could transmit, he collapsed too. Now an Airbus carrying 189 souls was flying itself through unstable weather, with no conscious pilot in the cockpit, and the only person who still remembered how to land an airliner was a woman every airline had once refused to hire. Scene 2. Introduction. October 18, 7:05 a.m. Pacific Horizon Flight 728. An Airbus A321neo. Route: Seattle to Denver. Flight time: 2 hours and 38 minutes. Weather across most of the route looked favorable. Only isolated turbulence over Idaho. No thunderstorms. No icing. No significant wind shear. Captain Michael Dawson had over 18,000 flight hours, known for remaining calm under pressure. First Officer Daniel Kim had recently upgraded to the A321 after years flying regional jets. The cabin crew consisted of 5 experienced flight attendants. The passenger list totaled 183 travelers, including business executives, college students, a honeymoon couple, a retired Air Force mechanic, several children, and one quiet woman sitting in seat 14A. Her name was Sarah Bennett. She boarded carrying only a backpack. No one recognized her. No one noticed the worn leather logbook tucked inside. No one knew she once had more than 7,000 flight hours, or that 5 years earlier, every airline interview she'd attended had ended with the same sentence: "We're going with another candidate." Today she wasn't traveling as a pilot. She was simply another passenger. Or so everyone believed. Scene 3. The woman who never stopped flying. 5 years earlier, Sarah Bennett thought her dream was about to begin. She had graduated near the top of her class. Instructor pilots praised her decision-making. Simulator evaluators called her one of the smoothest instrument pilots they'd tested. She held every qualification required to fly commercial aircraft. Yet interview after interview ended the same way. Sometimes the airline froze hearing. Sometimes they preferred applicants with military backgrounds. Sometimes she simply wasn't selected. Eventually, the rejection letters stopped hurting. The silence hurt more. To pay the bills, Sarah became a simulator instructor. Every day she taught airline crews how to manage emergencies: engine failures, rapid decompression, hydraulic failures, electrical fires, rejected takeoffs. She taught pilots how to survive situations she hoped she'd never face herself. She never stopped studying, never stopped flying simulators, never let her skills fade. But she accepted one painful truth. She would probably never sit in an airline cockpit. She had no idea fate was preparing her for something far greater. Scene 4, a routine climb. Flight 728 climbed smoothly through 28,000 feet. The seatbelt sign switched off. Passengers relaxed. Coffee cups appeared. Laptops opened. Children laughed. Inside the cockpit, Captain Dawson smiled. "Nice morning." Daniel nodded. "Best weather we've had all week." ATC called. "Pacific Horizon 728. Climb and maintain flight level 370. Captain Dawson replied. "Flight level 370, Pacific Horizon 728. Everything sounded routine. Engine parameters remained normal. Fuel balance was perfect. Cabin pressure stable. Navigation systems functioning. Nothing hinted at what would happen next. Except, far ahead, a barely visible line of towering clouds. Scene 5, the first warning. 38 minutes into the flight. The turbulence arrived. Light at first, then moderate. Passengers gripped armrests. Flight attendants secured the cabin. Inside the cockpit, the weather radar painted patches of yellow and red. Daniel suggested, "We should ask for 20 miles right." Captain Dawson agreed. ATC responded immediately. "Pacific Horizon 728, deviation approved." The aircraft banked gently. Then, without warning, a sharp electrical click echoed through the cockpit. One display flickered, recovered, then flickered again. Captain Dawson frowned. "That's strange." Another caution appeared. "Electrical bus 2 fault. Not critical, but unusual." The crew began the checklist. Neither pilot realized. This was only the beginning. Scene 6, silence in the cockpit. Minutes later, the cockpit temperature suddenly increased. Daniel loosened his collar. "Getting warm in here." Captain Dawson rubbed his forehead. "I don't feel." He stopped. Daniel looked over. The captain's face had gone pale. He reached for the oxygen mask, but his hand missed. The side stick slipped from his fingers. Daniel immediately took control. "My aircraft." No response. Daniel transmitted urgently. "Seattle Center, Pacific Horizon 728, we have a medical emergency." ATC answered instantly. "Pacific Horizon 728, say the nature of your emergency." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. His vision blurred. The radio slipped from his hand. Then, he collapsed forward onto the instrument panel. Inside the cockpit, only warning chimes remained. Beyond the locked cockpit door, passengers still believed everything was under control. But in seat 14A, Sarah Bennett looked toward the front of the cabin. Something didn't feel right. And within moments, a desperate knock would echo on the cockpit door, changing the fate of all 189 people on board. Scene 7. Something is terribly wrong. The cabin had grown unusually quiet. The turbulence had ended. The engines hummed with their familiar, reassuring rhythm. Yet something felt off. Lead flight attendant Emily Carter glanced at the cockpit clock. It had been almost 20 minutes since the last routine call from the flight deck. Normally, Captain Dawson checked in after weather deviations. Today, nothing. Emily picked up the interphone. "Flight deck, this is Emily." Silence. She tried again. "Captain." Only static. She exchanged nervous looks with another flight attendant. "Maybe they're busy." Another minute passed. Still nothing. Emily pressed the emergency cockpit call. The louder emergency chime rang inside the cockpit. No answer. Passengers began noticing the crew whispering. A businessman looked up from his laptop. "Everything okay?" Emily smiled professionally. "I'm sure it is, sir." But inside, her heart had begun racing. Pilot dialogue cockpit. Only warning alarms answered. Master caution. Autopilot off. The aircraft had reverted to alternate law after multiple electrical faults. Without pilot input, it began drifting off its assigned heading. ATC dialogue. Seattle Center. Pacific Horizon 728, radio check. Silence. Pacific Horizon 728 Center. No response. Controllers exchanged worried looks. Passenger reactions. Most passengers still watched movies. Others slept peacefully. Only a few noticed the uneasy expressions on the cabin crew. Technical explanation. Commercial airliners are expected to check in with air traffic control at regular intervals. When an aircraft suddenly stops responding, controllers first suspect a radio failure. But if multiple radios remain silent, a much more serious emergency may be unfolding. Suspense ending. Emily reached into the emergency equipment compartment. Inside was a sealed envelope, one she had prayed she'd never have to open. Scene 8, the secret code. Emily carefully broke the seal. Inside were emergency procedures. The final page contained a code. Emergency cockpit access. Only to be used if the pilots were incapacitated. Her hands trembled. The senior flight attendant entered the access code. A countdown began. 5 seconds. 10. 20. Inside the cockpit. No one canceled the request. The reinforced cockpit door slowly unlocked. Emily pushed it open. Then froze. Captain Dawson was unconscious. First Officer Kim had collapsed across the center pedestal. Warning lights covered the instrument panel. The Airbus was still flying. But barely. Emily whispered, "Oh my God." Pilot dialogue. None. Only alarms. Passenger reactions. The forward galley curtain accidentally shifted. A passenger caught a glimpse inside. "What happened?" Whispers spread. Within seconds, people realized something unimaginable was happening. Technical explanation. Modern airliners have emergency cockpit access systems. If the pilots fail to respond within a preset time, authorized cabin crew can unlock the cockpit from outside. The procedure exists for extremely rare situations involving pilot incapacitation. Suspense ending. Emily realized she didn't know how to fly an Airbus. Neither did anyone else. Or so she believed. Scene 9, the woman in 14A. Emily hurried into the aisle. Her voice remained calm. "If there is anyone on board with professional flight experience." Silence. Nobody moved. Then, seat 14A. Sarah slowly stood. "I may be able to help." Emily looked relieved. "You've flown." Sarah hesitated. "I've never flown passengers. I instructed airline crews in Airbus simulators." Several nearby passengers stared. "You mean?" "I know the aircraft." Emily didn't hesitate. "Come with me." As Sarah walked forward, she noticed frightened faces watching her. She wasn't wearing a pilot's uniform. She carried no captain's stripes, just jeans, a sweater, and years of forgotten dreams. Passenger dialogue. Is she really a pilot? I thought she was just another passenger. My God. Suspense ending. Sarah stepped into the cockpit, the place she'd dreamed of entering for years. But never like this. Scene 10, back in the left seat. The smell hit her first. Warm electronics, coffee, oxygen masks, warning lights. Captain Dawson barely breathed. Daniel remained unconscious. Sarah immediately checked both pilots. They're alive. Emily nodded. What do we do? Sarah sat in the captain's seat. For 1 second, she simply stared. Thousands of simulator hours flooded back. Muscle memory returned. She placed both hands on the controls, just like she'd practiced. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of times. Pilot dialogue. Sarah quietly said, "Okay, let's fly." She pressed the transmit switch. ATC dialogue. Seattle Center. A long pause. Pacific Horizon 728. My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm a passenger. Both pilots are unconscious. I have simulator instructor experience. I need help. Inside the control center. Nobody spoke. Technical explanation. Air traffic controllers are trained for extraordinary situations. But hearing a passenger identify herself as a simulator instructor taking control of a commercial airliner was unprecedented. Suspense ending. The controller finally answered, and his next words would change everything. Scene 11, every radar screen stops. Seattle Center supervisor immediately declared an emergency. Every nearby controller focused on Flight 728. Military liaison officers were notified. Medical specialists joined the operations room. An experienced Airbus check captain was contacted by telephone. Meanwhile, Sarah carefully stabilized the aircraft. Altitude, 37,000 feet. Speed, Mach 0.78. Fuel, enough for several options. The controller spoke calmly. Sarah, if you can hear me, you're not alone. She closed her eyes. For the first time, someone believed in her. Passenger reactions. The captain made no announcement. Instead, Emily addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency involving our flight crew. We ask everyone to remain seated. The cabin became silent. A little girl squeezed her mother's hand. A retired Air Force mechanic quietly whispered, "Whoever's flying up there, don't give up." Suspense ending. Far ahead, a line of powerful thunderstorms was growing faster than expected. Scene 12, the storm ahead. Weather radar painted the sky. Green, yellow, red, then deep crimson. Towering storm cells stretched across the planned route. ATC immediately issued new vectors. Turn right heading 150. Sarah complied. The aircraft responded smoothly. Controllers exchanged surprised looks. Her control inputs were calm, measured, professional, exactly what experienced captains teach. Then, a louder warning sounded. Master warning. A hydraulic caution appeared. Another failure. Not catastrophic, but dangerous. Sarah opened the electronic checklist. One emergency solved. Another had just begun. Outside, lightning illuminated the clouds. Inside, 189 lives depended on a woman no airline had ever hired. And the worst part of the flight was still ahead. Scene 19, the last 5 minutes. The runway lights pierced the rain like a narrow path through the darkness. Every controller in the tower stood watching. Airport fire trucks lined both sides of the runway. Ambulances waited with engines running. Inside the cockpit, Sarah Bennett tightened her grip on the side stick. Her breathing was slow and controlled. The training captain speaking over the radio remained calm. "Training captain, Sarah, you're perfectly lined up. Small corrections only. Don't chase the instruments." Sarah, runway in sight. ATC, Pacific Horizon 728, wind 270 at 14 knots, runway cleared to land. Emergency crews are standing by. The Airbus descended through 1,000 feet. The automated voice echoed. 1,000. Everything looked stable. Then, without warning, a gust of crosswind pushed the aircraft left. The nose drifted off the center line. Several passengers screamed. Sarah made a smooth correction. The runway lights moved back to the center of the windshield. Passenger reactions. A little boy buried his face in his mother's shoulder. An elderly couple quietly held hands. The cabin fell completely silent. Everyone understood this was the moment that would decide their fate. Technical explanation. Crosswinds are among the most challenging conditions during landing. Pilots must continuously correct for the wind while maintaining the proper glide path and alignment with the runway. Suspense ending. Only seconds remained. Scene 20, the landing that changed everything. The runway rushed toward them. The automated callouts continued. 50, 40, 30. Sarah gently raised the nose. 20, 10. The main landing gear touched first. Thump. A second later, the nose gear settled smoothly. Reverse thrust roared. Spoilers deployed. The aircraft slowed rapidly. Inside the cabin, passengers held their breath. Then, the Airbus rolled safely to a stop. For a brief moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then applause erupted. Some passengers cried openly. Others embraced complete strangers. Sarah leaned back in the captain's seat. Only then did she realize her hands were shaking. Outside, emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft. Medical teams rushed aboard and treated Captain Dawson and First Officer Kim. Both survived after suffering carbon monoxide exposure caused by a rare failure in the cockpit air supply system. Scene 21, the investigation. Over the following months, investigators recovered the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. The evidence revealed a chain of unlikely failures. A malfunction in the cockpit ventilation system allowed contaminated air into the flight deck. Both pilots became incapacitated within minutes. The aircraft's electrical issues increased the crew's workload just before they lost consciousness. The emergency cockpit access procedure worked exactly as designed. Sarah Bennett's simulator experience allowed her to understand the aircraft systems and communicate effectively with air traffic control. Investigators also emphasized an important point. In real-world aviation, safely landing a modern airliner without qualified type-rated pilots is extraordinarily unlikely. This story imagines an exceptional scenario in which a highly experienced simulator instructor receives continuous support from air traffic controllers and an airline training captain. Scene 22, Epilogue. Months later, Sarah stood in an airline training center. Not as a passenger, not as an applicant, but as an honored guest. Captain Dawson shook her hand. "I've landed thousands of flights," he said, "but I'll always remember the one you finished." The room filled with applause. For years, airlines had told Sarah she wasn't the right choice. On one unforgettable day, she became the only choice. And because she refused to let her knowledge fade, 189 people returned home to their families. Final message: modern aviation is built on preparation, teamwork, and constant training. Every checklist, every simulator session, every emergency drill exists for the moment everyone hopes will never come. Most passengers never see the countless professionals working behind the scenes to keep flights safe. But sometimes, one person's years of quiet dedication become the difference between tragedy and survival. Outro. If this story moved you, remember that it is a fictional aviation drama inspired by real airline procedures, created to highlight the importance of aviation training and teamwork. If you enjoyed this documentary-style story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more cinematic aviation stories. Because in aviation, every decision matters, every second counts, and every safe landing has a story behind it. The end.